Right.
Take that, Spotify.
Fuck Spotify. That's what I say.
I mean,
Right,
this goes out on Spotify.
Yeah. It's a Spotify exclusive, in fact, because I'm too lazy to put it on anything else. Hello and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show, kicking off your week on a Monday morning with miniature wargaming chat. Your host this morning are me, Onod, OT.
Hi.
And the Mayor.
Hello.
And in today's show, in the first ever show, in fact, perfect timing to start this because we are going to be able to talk about all of the new reveals for Middle-earth that Games Workshop showed off last week. And then we're going to be talking about a couple of legendary legions. We're going to be putting them into a tier list that we're going to be starting off. First, though, I think we'll just have a quick chat about what have we been up to hobby-wise, if we've been up to anything, because I'm aware that one of us hasn't.
Is that you?
No, it is in fact not me. I've painted a whole 2 miniatures this week, which I can talk about. I was referring to OT, who's been on holiday. Oh, May, you can start off then. What have you been up to this week?
Well, this week I've been preparing for Ardacon, so I'm desperately painting my miniatures. In fact, as we speak, I'm painting the helmet of my commander for the Assault upon Isengard Legendary Legion. So
Nice.
mainly painting that. Also, our little challenge that we were doing, I painted the last of my Warg Attack Rohan forces, which included Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli on a horse, and a banner. Legolas and Gimli on a horse being my favourite model in the whole range. So that's me.
Very nice. Very nice. Good to paint the Legolas on horse. Was it everything you dreamed it would be?
It was, and I'm actually not a massive fan of the new Three Hunters miniatures. I was looking at some really old Three Hunters miniatures that just look so much nicer, so much less bulky. And
I actually have those old Three Hunters miniatures.
Oh, well, they're going for quite a find on eBay. So
unfortunately, I have the fine cast version.
Oh my! So
so they're actually worthless.
And we're really getting into how much you hate metal miniatures.
Yeah, but the fine cast ones are probably worth less than the resin it took to produce them. There you go. OT, you haven't done the thing this week, but I know that you have prepared a few models to paint, haven't you?
Yeah, well, in follow-up to my highly anticipated Mordor list, there is Angmar coming up. I essentially just taking the Witch King and a bunch of the orcs that I've painted up, and then I've got Berda, Barrow Whites, all the standard Angmar stuff, and probably got similar, probably 700-800 points. I think the Wargs are quite cool to paint. I've never done anything like that before, and I'm really enjoying them. So yeah, I think it's looking forward to super gluing those together. I've gone controversially for Loctite rather than Gorilla Glue, which is served me well up until
we were talking about this because OT super glues his plastic miniatures, which I think you might do as well, right?
Is he there?
He's gone.
He's gone. Well, there we go. It was only a matter of time. But yeah, so I super glue mine. I know you're in favour of plastic glue. You're entitled to do that. That's your right. But I think super glue
thank you.
It's just a bit more versatile and can be used for metal miniatures, which I know you also hate. So yeah. That's my 2 cents.
I hate metal miniatures, so I avoid super glue at all possible points in my life. Yeah. Well, anyway, the 2 miniatures that I've painted, they're not Lord of the Rings miniatures, in fact, but miniatures for a game called Burrows and Badgers.
I swear there was a beaver in there.
Yeah, beavers and badgers. It's something like that. For listeners who are unaware of the game, it's basically animals kind of dressed up with like weapons and stuff.
It's not a game for furries. Definitely not a game for furries.
No, thank you for that clarification. But I think like Disney's Robin Hood or the Red Wall series, if anyone knows what that is. I know you two don't. Or Wind in the Willows. I think that one's maybe a bit better known. It's kind of along that line of things. So I've painted up a little frog this week who kind of looks a bit like Yoda, which was fun to paint. And then I also painted up a platypus, a duck-billed platypus.
Platypuses glow in the dark.
Interesting animal
fact there.
That's your animal fact for the
glow
week.
in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm imagining like a fluorescent green platypus now. I imagine that it's that kind of glow stick like.
You'll just have to
image.
repaint your platypus now.
Maybe I should. Maybe it was a mistake to actually bother painting. I should have just flushed on some of that glow in the dark rubbish. Well, there we go. I think we will move speedily on then, as we clearly haven't actually done that much this week, to news. There's actually quite a lot of news in regards to Middle-earth, because they did a massive reveal last week of a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be coming up, including not a new edition, but a new rulebook, a new starter set with some classic heroes. So they're calling them battle host boxes, but they're basically starter boxes for a few factions. And then they've also got some elves coming up as well. What were our thoughts on the preview show? Did we enjoy it?
I don't think. No. I thought the presentation was fine. I thought Adam was good. I think they could have picked a second person who was better than, was it Eddie? I've forgotten his name. I kind of feel sorry for him in a way, because he's the main presenter, but he clearly doesn't really know what he's talking about. Yeah, but Adam loves the game, clearly. He's really passionate about it, and I think I'd rather have somebody who's maybe not as slick a presenter, but like really cares about the game.
You do wonder why they don't just get someone like J. Claire on.
He'd be perfect. Anyway, but I know we obviously, the.
Sorry, was it Adam Troke that was on?
Yeah. It was, yeah.
You know, he used to basically make the rules.
He did, yeah. He was the head of the revival when it became Middle-earth, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So he probably has some clue. Just.
Oh yeah.
He was the guy. He was the one we liked.
He was the shining light through the dark. It was the other presenter. He literally just chimed in with absolutely just pointless.
He came with a mega value, did he?
Yeah.
Because I got to witness it vicariously through you two sending messages to our group chat. So.
Sorry, I'd forgotten that you were watching it live.
Yeah, I didn't get to witness the glory.
Yeah.
But the stuff they announced, I thought was really good. Like the Warhammer community seemed to, the Middle-earth SPG community seemed a bit divided on it, including the 40k fans who were chiming in with the Age of Sigma or wherever it was in the chat. But like, for what they announced, I thought it was really cool. Like, it'll get more people playing the game. We haven't heard prices yet, and that's the slight caveat. Like, if they can bring in Osgiliath at around 120 quid, maybe a bit less, I think it looks really good value. And if they can bring the starter boxes in under 60 quid, again, I think they represent fairly good value.
Well, a lot of people are saying, aren't they, that the new starter box is not as good value as the old one because you get less miniatures.
Yep.
But you're now getting scenery.
Yeah.
And as a starter box, it's probably actually better, isn't it? Because the old starter box was fantastic value, but putting together, if you are only just starting the hobby, putting together a big plastic miniature like the Fell Beast, where it's only connected to the base with its tail, it's probably not actually that great. And not having any scenery means that you're playing a much less interesting game.
Yeah.
And this one actually provides you with Yes, it doesn't give you two heroes, so technically speaking, they're not legal forces.
Sorry,
blah,
is there
blah,
not?
blah.
What force doesn't have a hero? The Mordor.
Well, the Mordor force only has Gothmog, so some people are saying, well, you'd need to go out and buy another hero because you're getting too many models for Gothmog's warband. And then, of course, for Rangers for Faramir's force, you either have too many bows, or you run Rangers of Ithilien, but then you need Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, which is something
To be honest, it
later.
sounds.
But it doesn't matter, does it?
But it sounds a bit like one of my colleagues today bought a magazine in Smith's, a GW magazine with 40k sisters in it that look awesome. He thought, oh, £9 for like 6 models. That's pretty good. I'll buy that. For Kill Team, not a legal Kill Team force. So now he has to buy a £25 box set to actually have a Kill Team. Which would have made a Kill Team in the first place.
This is where people are, saying it's annoying that they don't include complete forces. But again, it's not for those people, is it? It's a start box. It's intended for people to start. And you don't have to play legally when you're starting the game.
No, I agree.
So I think as a starter box, it works much better than Pelennor. As a way to start your collection, if you're an experienced wargamer, maybe it's not quite as good. Like if you've already got terrain lying around and you're just jumping into a new system, probably not as good. If you're brand new, and I think one of the reasons, presumably, why they're doing this pre-order in September is because they're hoping new people will jump in after the Amazon show. It's probably better for that, isn't it?
That's a really good point.
But anyway, we'll move on from the Starbox because they've got the battle host or the kind of faction for Mordor, Isengard, Minas Tirith, and Rohan. Thoughts on these?
I would have bought the Mordor box had it come out a few months earlier. It's literally like what I wanted for my army, and I think they're really good. There may be, again, maybe not for the more experienced players who already have a bit of a collection. Like, I don't think that's who they're for. But you can take these and you essentially have, I haven't done any of the maths on the points. My guess would be around 400, maybe 500 points. I don't know.
For 3 of them, you're getting 6 cavalry and 24 infantry, except for Isengard, where you are getting 44 infantry, Saruman, and Bremer. So the Isengard one is going to be much higher points just because Urks are a bit more elite. But the others are roughly gonna fit in around the same, probably. But yeah, they I think they're great.
Yep.
And it's nice, isn't it, that they're actually doing this? Because before now, I mean, if you go into a Games Workshop and you want to start this game, you're firstly running the kind of risk of the person running the store not knowing what they're talking about. Because most of them probably mostly play 40k. And this is just good because they can just say buy this box and they don't need to know about it to offer you that advice.
The GW in Hereford, literally their entire Lord of the Rings range is just the Pelennor Fields box set. That is it.
Yep.
So it would be nice to supplement that with, anything.
But I think this gives them the opportunity because it's 4 boxes. It takes up very little shelf room, but it massively increases the footprint in the store, doesn't it?
Yeah. And like we said, we've talked about this a bit previously. Say when we first started, we were 13, 14, whatever, we didn't have a load of money to go around buying all of these ourselves necessarily. And if this is being bought for you, suddenly they only have to walk into Games Workshop and say, and they could literally, I don't know, show you a picture, like a screenshot of this is the box I want.
The
like,
one box, yeah.
And there's no like, oh, maybe you could buy this, or you could buy, they might need this or this, whatever. It's literally just like, buy this box. It's 55 quid roughly, and that's it sorted. And I don't know, it just makes it so much more, because like your parents, unless they're very into the hobby, aren't going to understand it necessarily as well as you. And like, if you try and get them to buy all these different boxes, like, I don't know, adults are pretty lazy, spoiler here, but like, they're not going to want to go out and buy like 4 or 5 different things. If they can get you like just this one box and that gets you an army sorted, perfect.
Yeah, and for adults wanting to get into it, where you're looking at, disposable income, it's going to be a money saver, because these star boxes always save you money. That's kind of the point. Yeah. So it's a great thing, and on top of that, they've said the rules are going to be free online, so that's pretty good. And then the elves, what do we think of them?
The
Glorfindel's beautiful.
Looks sick.
It's amazing.
I'm not going to buy him.
He's going to be Forge World. Is he Forge World?
He'll be Forge World.
He is Forge World. They said on the stream he would be.
But
he's the sort of miniature where you're going to look at a very good painter who's painted him.
Oh, yeah. Scott will
be like, wow. That would be amazing.
I could never do that because I don't have the patience. I mean, I'm looking now at the GW website, and like the pictures of him, that is crazy. I mean, my guess is the model will be, I don't know, 30, 35 quid maybe for the foot and mounted.
For Forge World, normally he'd be between kind of high 20s and 30s, wouldn't he, for a foot mounted, you'd imagine.
Yeah, but like, that's a really cool model. Elrond also looked fine.
Yeah. Actually,
he's plastic.
He is definitely plastic. He's got a lot less attention than Glorfindel, but I actually think it's another really nice miniature. I think it doesn't necessarily look exactly like he does in the films.
No.
But he looks good. It's not like they've horrifically ruined the model. He's just not quite as spot on as some of the other miniatures in the range. But that might be a painting thing as much as a sculpting thing. Yeah, so I mean, overall, really positive preview. And we now know that it's going to be released in December with a sort of extended pre-order that you can do in September.
Just before Christmas.
Cool. Just before Christmas, exactly. Right, I think there we will cut to our first song. And context for choosing this song, I've recently been watching Sandman on Netflix. Don't know if you guys have seen it.
Not yet.
No. But it's really cool. I binge watched it all. It's like based on a sort of comic book, and it's about like the god of dreams and stuff. Then a first song, then Enter Sandman by Metallica. And that was Enter Sandman by Metallica. Fantastic song there. Not a fan of metal massively, but can pull with a bit of Metallica every now and again. Yes, music or miniatures. It's very cheap. All metal is
anything metallic. He has an irrational fear.
Anything metallic. It's just the worst. Right, we're going to move on to our main topic. We're going to be looking at 2 Legendary Legions, Army of Gothmog, Range of Ithilien. Very appropriate given the news. Going to be, I think, comparing them, saying which one we think is better. We're going to be really aiming to do this from a kind of collecting, thematic kind of starting off with a Legendary Legion rather than a competitive focus. None of us are people who go out and win tournaments, so we're not going to pretend that we've like extensively play tested these, but we're going to more talk about them from a kind of, if you wanted to start a Legendary Legion, what do we think? Is it a good idea? Is it worth it over the regular list? Should we start off with Army of Gothmog?
Yes.
Right, OT, do you want to run us through then Army of Gothmog? What does it look like? What are you getting if you take this? And for people who don't know, Legendary Legion, it's essentially an army list that gets slightly different special rules than a regular army list, but you get a limited selection of units. So you can't take everything and get extra rules. You're limiting yourself. You can't take allies. but you get some cool rules. It's fluffy, it's thematic. That's what we're looking at. Army of Gothmog then, off we go.
So it's a force based around the obviously the army of Gothmog that attacked Osgiliath and then Minas Tirith. It's in the book Gondor at War, and there are the restrictions are you basically lose out on some of the bigger Mordor heroes, but you still get Gothmog, who has to be your leader and becomes a hero of legend, which is quite nice. You get that automatic courage pass first turn you break. Then you can take all of the new heroes that were introduced in Gondor at War. So Goroth, Captain of the Morannon, Guritz, Gothmog's Enforcer, and Zagdush, Orc Captain. So those are ones that were introduced, and you can take all of those. You can also have Morannon Orc Captains, Orc Shamans, Taskmaster, Drummer. Those are your hero options. Then you can take normal Orc Warriors with all the stuff, Morannon Orcs with all their normal stuff, a Mordor Troll, which is quite nice. I quite like that. And you can also take with the Wardrome. And then controversially, you have the Mordor Siege Bow and the War Catapult, depending on how you feel about siege engines. Your special rules, so you lose out on the normal Mordor army bonus, but in place of those, you get 2 special rules. Destruction of Men. So range of Gothmog's Age of Men is over. Special rule is increased to 12 inches. And then Gothmog, the time of the Orc has come, is battlefield wide. So basically, Age of Men is over is you can reroll wounds against enemy models who have the man or men character tag, and then Gothmog's Time of the Orc has come gives you rerolls to wound, I think, in combat. I'll double check that one, but I think that's what it is.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah, and the final one, friendly Orc models. It's tyrannical rule. Friendly Orc models may benefit from Gothmog's Standfast, which is quite nice because they're all quite low courage. So yeah, that's what you get.
And for people who are unfamiliar with the Mordor list, obviously it sounds like you get quite a lot of units in that, when I just said that of course you're limited in your selection. The Mordor list is absolutely huge, and I think that the key thing you lose here is you don't get ring race. So that's kind of what you're weighing up, really. There are other things, of course, like you don't get the Mordor Uruk-hai and sort of other more niche models, but losing the ring race probably the ring race is the big one.
Yeah. No magic is a big blow to Mordor, I think.
No magic is a big blow. I mean, we can start off with our Mordor player and collector, who considered taking this.
Yes.
When we were chatting about
there were
it.
Many messages in the chat.
And didn't. So I think it would be interesting to maybe start with, why didn't you go for this Legendary Legion? And in fact, you just went for the regular Mordor list in the end, didn't you?
Yeah. So I'm going to save some of my points for later, because I have I basically, when I was picking which list I wanted to do, I created a little Google Doc and I wrote down some of my thoughts. So I've got some of those which I'll hold back for later. Essentially, what it came down to for this one is, and this one is quite controversial, I'm not that big a fan of Gothmog. And as your big hero, I'm not that big a fan of him.
I don't know if that's that controversial.
Anyway, but we'll talk about that in a second. And I don't know. I think the Mordor list is weird, because I think they weirdly sum it up quite well in the little faction breakdown thing they put at the top. It's almost like you have too much choice. Like, you can go in virtually any direction with Mordor. You can have lots of magic, like the Witch King, who I think is phenomenal. I think he's great. And then Kardush, the Firecaller, who's also great. Like, you have really powerful magic, and losing out on that is a big deal. Not so much with the sort of melee heroes. I quite like the variety of heroes you get with this Legendary Legion. I think they're pretty good. But yeah, it's just losing out on the Witch King, and to a less extent Shagrat, who I think is really good as well. Like, he's a big loss. I imagine he'd fit into most Mordor lists. So, and then
there's lesser ring race as well, who are really good depending on how you want to build it. Even the unnamed ring race are good as budget casters.
Yeah, but ultimately, I just don't think this Legendary Legion gives you that much in return. And if you compare it, especially to some of the later Legendary Legions that came out in Defense of the North, for instance, like the number of rules and buffs that those have is just ridiculous. And in comparison to this, which is, yeah, it's nice if you're facing up against an army of men, like you get some nice bonuses. I think this would match up really well against Gondor, for instance. But if you don't come up against men, you're getting that one turn of re-rolling wounds and a standfast, and that's it. And like with Mordor's army bonus, you can re-roll ones when you're making strikes, provided you outnumber, which you should be. So I don't think it gives you enough in comparison for the restrictions.
I think
Go on.
I was just going to say, it's worth noting, though, a lot of the armies, the Legendary Legion is used to almost balance it. So although you're not getting mega rules in return, your base army list is still pretty good. You still have access to, trolls, siege weaponry, fairly good troops, a fairly good variety of heroes, including Zagdush. So you still do have. Is Zagdush the? No, he's not the. You don't have any magic in this, do you? There's no.
You have a regular orc shaman. That's the only thing.
Okay.
So Kardush is the fire dude. Zagdush is the swords dude.
Got you. So you still got. Yeah, but overall, compared to some of the newer legions that are very limited on troops, and they do have better rules, but it's to help an overall weaker faction.
Yeah, Mordor isn't a weak faction. Like this, if you took this Legendary Legion to a tournament or something, like it would still do well because like the core of it seems to be really strong. And I don't like Gothmog, but I think it's fine.
I'd say I have two issues with Legendary Legion. The first one is that I just don't think you could do this theme without the Legendary Legion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Include a ring wraith, maybe on a fell beast, and you're probably gonna do just as well, if not better, than the Legendary Legion.
Yeah.
So I think that's the number one. That's why it doesn't, because obviously what the mayor's saying is absolutely fair. You get a much better troop selection here. So obviously the rules aren't going to necessarily be phenomenal because of that. But that also is almost kind of the weakness of this, is that they give you so many options. It almost leaves you at the point of just going, well, I might as well just take the regular list then.
Yeah, it misses Cav, it misses Nazgul. Yeah, it doesn't have magic.
The only benefits it gives you, you would already have. They'd just be slightly weaker versions of what you get.
Mm.
I think the second thing that I'd say is as well, it doesn't work thematically that well for me. And I think the reason for this is more balance rather than... And this is where I think its biggest weakness, Legendary Legion, lies. Legendary Legion is meant to capture a moment for books or film, and it's meant to be a kind of cool way to do something thematic. The moment in the film that they're capturing, Pelennor Fields, has loads of Nazgul riding around overhead. It has the Witch King commanding the army, with Gothmog as kind of like the lieutenant on the ground. But they don't include any of that. And presumably that is because if they gave you that, it would then be probably too strong.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like if you were to run this as a Pelennor list, like let's say you did a narrative game of Pelennor Fields, you wouldn't want to run this list.
No.
Because you wouldn't be able to recreate it. And that feels a bit off to me.
It does say, it's worth noting, in the fluff page of the army of Gothmog, it says, it is these forces that stormed the ruined city of Osgiliath and claimed it for the Dark Lord before marching upon the city of Minas Tirith. So I wonder if it's actually trying to capture essentially that.
Even so, though, you have Nazgul there.
Yeah. Including in two towers at the end. Like, there is literally a scene where there is Frodo and like...
It's very true.
I think what you're saying is right. It's to do with balance, because if they put the ring rates in, suddenly it's just a Mordor list.
Yeah, it's a bit too limiting. Yeah. They went too far, maybe.
Yeah.
But equally, if you put the Nazgul in, then it's almost like a no-brainer. The only thing you'd be missing then is cavalry, and maybe that makes it too strong.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about why I dislike Gothmog, or is that something that's best saved for another time?
Go on. Before we play the next song,
give us your elevator pitch.
I'm actually really interested to hear what you guys think. Because like I put a reasonable amount of thought into this. Because like I watched a couple of videos about the Mordor Legion because I didn't really know what I was doing. And they all really liked Gothmog. They put him A tier, S tier, right up there. And like I can see he's good. Like he has cool rules, but like. So you're going to give him a shield, so that makes him 135 points. In and around that 130 to 140 point thing, you have a bunch of other heroes who kind of does what he does.
A9 foot.
Yeah, or I mean, like I don't collect hobbits, so I don't know who that is. But
no, what?
That was a joke. That was a joke.
Okay.
he means the film. He means the film. He's bashing on the films, which we all like to do, except the mayor. He's like a Hobbit apologist. But anyway,
yeah, we move. So around his points value, there are a couple of other heroes who I picked out. Firstly, the other one is Amda, who like I just think is not objectively better, but seems to be almost like in every way like has advantages. And then the other one is Imrahil, who is 140, whose fight 6 gives a 12-inch banner. I know his troops aren't as good, but like he just doesn't. It's the fact he's fight 5. I think fight 5 for 135 points.
Now I think it is worth mentioning that of course points are not exclusively done on their stat lines. There is an element to which units are pointed based on the armies they're in. It's not a huge thing, but it will be a minor thing. And I think this is where the Legendary Legion falls apart, in that Gothmog is very good as your second hero.
But like, so...
And he isn't really good enough to carry a force, because if you take this Legendary Legion, you don't really have anything too killy.
Yeah. And like, yes, he has Master of Battle, but that's not enough to deal with the kind of threats he has to deal with.
But if you run him in a list with, say, you could run him with a cheaper character, but who brings a lot, like Shagrat, or you can run him with a more expensive character like the Witch King. Suddenly Gothmog is in a nice position, because then his buffs, you don't have the kind of danger of somebody just walking up and trying to snipe Gothmog. You don't have to base the entire strategy around getting the most out of his rules. You get his rules and you get something else.
Yeah. But I think the point we've made about like the lack of magic in this list, I think that just leaves him really vulnerable, because like an enemy caster is just going to shut him down so quickly. And he only has 1 fate point. Like, yes, he has 3 wounds, but he does only have 1 fate point. So I think he doesn't. Yeah, he just feels a little bit flimsy. Like I wouldn't be confident like charging him in head first and just killing everything in a combat. Like I don't.
No, the Legendary Legion's really built in a way that you don't do that, because it's all about keeping him alive. The synergy.
I mean, in your comparison to Amda, I'm just looking at the 2 profiles now, and the stat lines are identical, apart from he's fights 5 instead of fight 6, and he has worth shoot value, but that doesn't matter. So he's 1 less fights, fair enough. He has March, Strike, and Defense, and Amda has Strike and Challenge. Strike being the most important, obviously, but having March and Defense is probably more useful than having Challenge. And
definitely,
depending on your preference rules wise, Amda's a bit of a beast in combat, and Gothmog's more of a support character. But I mean, Hatred Man, pointless. And having a once per game, I suppose once you use the once per game, you can just kind of throw him in, and as long as there's no points for killing a leader, it's not too much of a problem, and he can try and kill some dudes.
But then also Amda's a banner. That's so much better. And
a 6-inch banner, no less.
Well, if he kills the enemy hero. Also he has that. I mean, it's a bit weird, but the strike ability, where like if the other person calls a strike, he calls 1 for free. And like that could be if you're fighting a lower fight hero and they call strike, you're getting 1 for free, and that kind of becomes, obviously it's not as good as Master of Battle. I'm not saying it is, but like in that scenario, it is. So I think obviously Easterlings are a different beast now that they've just got some of the most busted heroes in the history of the game. But like, it's just some that
people
that
are getting triggered now.
in your opinion,
no, that's not my opinion. That is a fact.
It's a categorical fact. Right, I think it's time for a song. And in honor of the Legendary Legion, we're going to be talking about next. We're going to be playing Gollum's Song by Emiliana Torini and Howard Shaw. That was Gollum's Song by Emiliana Torini and Howard Shaw, also known as the song that they have at the ends of the two towers, for anyone wondering. Someone hasn't gone and just written a song about Gollum. Actually, probably someone has, but there you go. Anyway, leading on from that song, lovely segue, because we're going to be talking about Gollum in just a moment. The Rangers of Ithilien Legendary Legion. How does it stack up? What are our thoughts? First of all, though, what is the Legendary Legion? Mayor, do you want to quickly run us through, roughly speaking, what is in the Legendary Legion? What are the rules like?
Yes, as I flip to it in my book.
Top quality preparation, as always.
I wasn't expecting to be singled out, so here we go. So the army composition is going to be Faramir with an optional horse, Madril, Damrod, and then you've got Frodo Baggins with Mithril Coat, Sting, and Elven Cloak, so you have to have him with those. Mm-hmm. Samwise Gamgee with Elven Cloak, again, have to have that, which really leans into the kind of fluffy moment that they appear for this Legendary Legion. Then you've got Smeagol, and then Captains of Minas Tirith that can take horse, bow, lance, or shield, and then Osgiliath Veterans, Warriors of Minas Tirith, and Rangers of Gondor. The additional rules are that Rangers of Ithilien must always include Faramir, Captain of Gondor, who is always the army leader. Samwise Gamgee can only be included in your force if Frodo Baggins is also included. Smeagol may only be included if the force has both Frodo and Sam. And then Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol may not lead a warband of models in this force. And since the FAQ, you now have to take Samwise Gamgee, Frodo, and Smeagol, which is good because beforehand you didn't, which basically meant you weren't taking.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a moment, but essentially you have to take them, don't you? And then what do you get for bringing all of those small hobbits?
So it comes with 3 special rules for this force. We've got Faramir's Rangers, which is Rangers of Gondor in warbands led by Faramir, Madril, or Damrod. Do not count towards the force's bow limit. So essentially, you've got 3 warbands there with 100% bow limit, which is going to be pretty powerful considering everyone's hitting on 3s, which I think is correct. So, someone's going to shout at me for that. We've got Captured by Gondor, which is Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol must either deploy together as one warband or included as part of Faramir's warband. Not particularly a special rule, I would say. You're not really gaining too much from this, other than the fact that, obviously, to get Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol into a force previously, you couldn't put them into a warband and protect them, whereas you can do that here. And Experience Trackers, which is Rangers of Gondor from this army list, gain the Woodland Creature special rule, which is a bit situational, but most balance tables tend to have some trees on it, so potentially a little bit of use there. Nothing massively spectacular, though, other than, of course, the bow limits.
Yes, and of course, as of Quest of the Ringbearer, it got a bit of an update as well. So 2 more kind of these really small characters, small in points cost rather than stature like the hobbits. Anborn and Mablung were added as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. You don't have a vast selection of warriors. You've got a lot of named heroes.
Do they also, I mean, for those 2 extra models, are they also allowed to have miniatures with 100% bow limit or not? Do you know?
They are.
Okay, so now you have 5 warbands, which is essentially quite a lot of points worth of stuff. So pretty much anything probably up to 700 points, I imagine, you can just have bows for days with
And
little
this-
Sam and Frodo tax.
Yeah, this is why they added the Sam and Frodo tax, because it was strong, wasn't it? I mean,
It was very strong.
you played this pre-tax, didn't you, Mayor? In a was it a tournament you played it against it?
It was in a tournament, and the chap that beat me went on to win the tournament, which is always a good feeling. So he'd essentially deployed up on a hill, as one does when their army is 100% bows.
Yeah.
And I had to run across a plain with my Isengard. I did have a few crossbows, but I was never going to win that shooting battle. Usually I'm used to the enemy coming to me when I'm using Isengard, but on this occasion I essentially just had to use all of my marches to get to my opponent as quickly as possible. When I did arrive, I was down to about a third of my force, and there was just nothing I could do to win any combats because I was being overwhelmed by attacks. One of the few battles where my berserkers actually had an opportunity to swing their sword around their heads, but they weren't able to win any fights to do that. So didn't go on to win that game, needless to say. And since the Sam and Frodo tax, a lot less people take them, but I think it's much fluffier that way.
It is much fluffier. I think you've drawn on perhaps the main flaw of the Legendary Legion, which is it that fun to play against or with? From your experience, was it that fun to play against?
It was definitely not fun to play against, and I think if you were using it, essentially there is one tactic, and it's a very good tactic, and it's extremely forgiving. It might not win you some scenarios that require a lot of board control, but essentially there's not a lot you can do wrong. There's not a lot of strategy involved. It is aim and shoot and maybe a little bit of kiting, but other than that, it's then just overwhelming with attacks in melee once your opponent, or what's left of your opponent, arrives.
Yeah, and it's probably not busted anymore because you've got to take, over
especially at lower points,
150-ish points of hobbits. So it used to be that this thrived at lower points because you had cheap heroes and you could spam bows. Now it's kind of only, you're probably considering it at a lot higher points, but it's not kind of the thing to be feared. Although I can imagine a new player would probably struggle to deal with this.
Yeah, especially since it took me a long time to learn that just because I have missile weapons equipped to miniatures doesn't mean I have to use them. If it's better to just charge the enemy and use them as bodies, then you should really do that. But it's hard to force yourself to do that when you're inexperienced. I definitely struggled.
I think there's always a moment, isn't there, that there's always a game where you kind of realise, I should be. I remember when I was running Rohan, sort of realising, these guys are just as good. They just don't have shields. And then you realise you've got those extra warriors. And this list just it's good, but maybe a bit boring. OT, what do you think?
I don't know. I put some initial things down. Like, I think the theme's really good. The Frodo Sam Gollum tax thing just ties it to a very specific point within the films, books, like whatever you want to call them. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's actually maybe a bit more fitting for Legendary Legion because, obviously this was a group of Gondor warriors that existed, and they didn't just exist in that one place with Sam and Frodo. They were around for a while, but I think I agree. Hearing people talk about this list, the people who play with it don't really enjoy playing with it because you're literally just rolling dice and then stuff dies and then they move forward and repeat.
It's a bit like saying 40k, really, isn't it?
Obviously, it's not always going to be that simple. I'm oversimplifying, but I could imagine, I think with the same issue that people have with the Vanquishers of the Necromancer Legendary Legion, where it just doesn't feel like an interactive experience. Like what Mayor said, you just march forward as hard as you can and try and close that gap and just hope you have enough left when you're there to win the fight. I think the tax makes the list go in an interesting direction because I put together a couple of 400 point and 600 point, 650 point lists for this podcast. And before, at 400 points, you could fit in about 31 to 32 bows, depending on the heroes you're taking. And like that feels a bit extreme. And then after the tax, you can fit in 18 bows, so it's not far off halved. Obviously, like that's literally just taking all the rangers in their cheapest form with the cheap heroes. So maybe that's not optimal, but like halving the number of bows, I think, does force it to play in a slightly different way, which can only be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's clearly the way it was intended to be played. They FAQ'd it so that, you know, that's the way you have to play it. And it's not really a game that's designed to be about shooting. There's a strategy to shooting, but it's really intended as more of a secondary thing to melee. So having this list, it wasn't that fun to play with unless you are the sort of person who only gains enjoyment from winning. And it wasn't that fun to play against, and that's kind of the overwhelming sense you get from people who did play against it. In terms then of a successful Legendary Legion, and we can compare a bit to Army of Gothmog here, theme-wise, personally, I think it's more successful thematically.
Yep.
I think it's a bit more fun. I think it's a bit more limiting, perhaps, in terms of, you know, you really don't get a lot of the big hitters from Minas Tirith. And Army of Gothmog is a reasonably pointy character. I know we were kind of saying that, you know, there are others who are a lot better than him, but when your best character is essentially Faramir really is essentially on that kind of named captain level of heroes. He's only slightly better than the unnamed guys. You definitely take him over the unnamed guys, but you're missing out on the Boromirs, you're missing out on the Gandalfs, you're missing out on the Aragorns, of course. It's nice, therefore, that you actually feel like you get something with this Legion. Having the bows, it's different. It does add a different gameplay. It's just maybe that gameplay isn't as fun as playing the game with other armies.
I think the key difference compared to Gothmog is if you were to try and recreate a scene from the movies featuring Faramir and his Rangers, you would take this Legendary Legion in a way that I don't think, like we were saying earlier, you would necessarily take the Army of Gothmog to recreate the stuff in Osgiliath and on the Pelennor Fields. And I think from that perspective, theme-wise, it does it really well, and it fills that role really nicely. Even stuff like them getting Woodland Creature, like they didn't have to include that. Like Mayor's said, like it's not going to be super. It's not super impactful all the time, but it's just a nice thing that they've shown they've thought about it and made it more of a Ranger thing, and I think that's good. Competitively, I don't know. I think at low points, I think the tax is pretty crippling. Like you just halve your number of bows, and yes, you do get Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, and they're not dead points, like they're not trash, but also they're definitely not in keeping with the theme of the army. Like I don't quite know how you would try and utilize them in a way that didn't just, you know, negatively impact the army. At higher points, at higher points, like you can include Warriors of Minas Tirith, and they have shields, and they do have shield wall. Like you could try and build some kind of like shield wall front line. I think that would be a bit weird, given what the force is trying to do, but it's not out the question if you had to do combat. But yeah, I think it does definitely negatively impact how competitive the list is.
And we'll be coming to talking about where Warriors of Minas Tirith might fit into this a little bit later when we talk about building a force. Should we just quickly touch upon the hobbits in this list? Because we kind of suggested that they're attacks. You don't want them, that they're just there because otherwise it would be too good. But actually, they're not necessarily the worst things in the world. Now, from a competitive standpoint, you don't want them because you can't spam the bows. But actually, Frodo can be very useful because he has the One Ring, because he's got the Mithril Coat, because he's got Heroic Defense. He isn't completely useless. Sam is a kind of weird one. I really like Sam, as
You do.
You guys know.
Who doesn't?
Just roll
But
sixes.
Sam just works very well for me in a way that my poor dice rolling usually is just dreadful, but for some reason Sam always does well. So I got a bit of a soft spot. He's not that useful, but he has his moments where actually he's not a complete waste of space. And then Gollum, he's not good, but he's also cheap. He gives you a might point. He gives you a 2 wound hero, a 2 attack hero with fight 4, strength 4. He's not actually the worst if you kind of are just treating him as, if you're playing a scenario where they're trying to kill a hero, not great. If you're playing a scenario where that doesn't matter, he's not actually that bad as a kind of just, if you just treat him as a warrior. So they're not awful. They just stop you from running the list in the most competitive way, but that doesn't really matter for most people.
Yeah. I think what Frodo does give you is a way to like slightly nullify bigger heroes. Like he doesn't kill them, but he does slow them down. And I think when I was like, I've just scribbled some notes down on this. The problem I have, similar to Gothmog, is you don't have magic, although you could kind of consider like bowfire, like it maybe has a similar effect in some regards, but it's not the same. And Faramir is your biggest hero, and Faramir is fine, but he, again, same as Gothmog, you're probably not going to charge him in and hope to kill a big enemy hero. So like maybe that's what Frodo is useful for. But the problem it comes back to for me is that instead of Frodo, you could have 10 Rangers of Gondor.
Yeah.
And but again, we're now straying into territory though of what makes a fun, good legendary legion, which are primarily intended to be thematic, and what makes a competitive army.
Yeah.
And yet Frodo's not competitive. You're not taking him to win, you're taking him because he adds the fluff. And he makes this legion something where you actually maybe have to put a bit more thought into playing it.
Yep.
Where, you've got 3 characters with lower moves, so you have to think about that. You've got 3 heroes who potentially are giving away points. You've got the ring, and you can do shenanigans involving that. You've got a hero with defense, which is very useful in certain situations. So it adds something, and forcing you to include them, I don't think is a bad thing. And I think it makes this a lot more reasonable.
And much more fun to play against and possibly even with. Like, I agree.
And possibly with, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, I think we will cut there then to another song, Fluorescent Adolescent, Arctic Monkeys, Off We Go. And that was Fluorescent Adolescent by Arctic Monkeys. Great song. Great band, Arctic Monkeys. You'll probably be hearing quite a bit of Arctic Monkeys every now and again on the pod. But anyway, we discussed then kind of the rule sides of both Legendary Legions. What we're going to do now is we're just going to run over kind of collecting. Good ways perhaps to start off if you want to collect these Legendary Legions, ways to maybe potentially do it if you don't want to shell out hundreds of pounds, although to be fair, you're probably not shelling out hundreds of pounds when you're starting off with any Lord of the Rings army, unless you're doing one of the expensive Forge World only ones. And then I think we might even have a look at maybe a list or two. Should we address the elephant in the room with collecting both of these then? Just get the new starter box.
Yep. Get some nice terrain, a rule book. Light work.
And I mean, if you are absolutely new to the game, that's the way to do it.
For sure.
Now, you will need to add stuff. So you won't get Frodo, you won't get Gollum, you won't get Sam. So you would need to get them for the Legendary Legion on that side. And then for Gothmog side, you don't need to get anything, but obviously you won't have many points if you just have Gothmog and a warband. but for him, you're probably looking at picking up a couple of his, his enforcer or a couple of the other named characters in his force. But it's a good place to start, and it's good thematically, and you get the nice plastic sculpts
and some terrain.
Beyond that, if we're maybe assuming people already in the game or don't want to buy the starter box, maybe they don't want both sides. You could split it with somebody, obviously. But what else? What other things are we looking at? What are maybe some lists? I think OT, you have come up with a couple of 400-point lists, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Now, these are not optimized lists. This is a hefty disclaimer. I have purely built these around trying to get the most bang for your buck in terms of like what's the least amount you can spend in order to get one of these armies on the board. So assuming you're not buying the starter set, for Army of Gothmog, I did Gothmog on Warg with the shield, which is 145 points. That's personally how I'd run him if you don't have to. Then in his warband, I did 7 Morannon Orcs with shield, 7 Mordor Orcs with spear. So you've got like a shield wall with the spears in behind, and then a Morannon Orc banner with a shield. Then the second warband, and this is where it gets controversial, and I will explain why I did this in a second. It's a Morannon Orc captain with a shield. I don't think he's the best hero, but there's a reason I put him in. And then there's 5 more Morannon Orcs with shield and 5 more Mordor Orcs with a spear. Okay, that comes to exactly 400 points. So
why the Morannon Orc captain and not one of the named ones?
Because you get the Morannon Orc banner and the Morannon Orc captain in the same box. So the one I think you should run is Guritz. Personally, I think he's pretty good. He's essentially 5 more points, but you get than the Morannon Orc captain, but you get a cool rule with deployment in Maelstrom of Battle, where you can. It's a bit. It's not quite as good as Lurtz's. It's a bit like Madril's rule, where you can move your dice up or down one depending on what you want to do, and then when he's on the board, you can, I think, automatically choose the results. So I think that's really useful and worth paying the 5-point premium over the Morannon Orc captain. But in terms of like trying to make this work efficiently, I thought it was better to do the Morannon Orc banner and the Morannon Orc captain with the shield.
Yeah, and I think when you're starting off, you should maximise use your boxes. I mean, if you really want to, you can go out and get everything you want.
Yeah.
But it's the thing with this hobby is you're probably going to slowly expand these forces inevitably anyway. You don't need to rush out and get everything. You can build it slowly. After the 400 points, then, Mayor, what do you think that it's worth getting all of those named heroes if you're expanding to bigger points costs?
Yep, I would definitely start looking at the named heroes. OT, did you say that you get an extra special rule for that 5 points? Do you also get a extra might points?
He's 3-1-1.
Yeah, so over the captain, you get a might point and a rule for 5 points.
Yes. But you lose a defense and you don't have a shield. But anyway, yeah.
Okay, so obviously the various named captains, they're just going to be flat out better, and they add a bit more personality to your force. So I would say, assuming that you've got enough orcs, which is always going to be a question, you can then start kind of upgrading them, if you like, and delving into different heroes. I would say, in terms of customizing your force, spending money on unique heroes is definitely the best way to create versatility in your force, because not only do some of the heroes just have flat out better stats and rules, they also sometimes let you play the warbands that they bring in different ways that you wouldn't get if you were just getting a different unit type or a different, having Morannon Orcs instead of normal Orcs or whatever. So yeah, start with heroes, and you can start looking at, I guess, like wargs and stuff after that, and more exciting general units. I imagine, OT, you've got some recommendations as well.
What, as we go to bigger points?
Yeah. Do you have? You've got a bigger list, have you?
Yeah. to be honest, it's not really worth going into that much detail. Essentially, the 650 point list is just more Morannon Orcs, which I think are really good. I think you get really good bang for your buck. A few Mordor Orcs for the spears behind, just for the extra attack. The one thing I will say is you don't get access to any fight for troops with this list. There are no Black Numenorians, there are no Mordor Uruk-hai. So it was all going to be fight 3, which is a bit of a problem. But I think apart from that, Morannon Orcs are a really good way to go. At bigger points, I would put in Guritz for sure, and then also Goroth, who's captain of Morannon, just because he's an absolute beast in combat, and gives you some real killing power.
What makes him a beast in combat?
So fight 5, strength 5, d6, 2 attacks. Then he's 3/1/1. He's got heavy armor, 2-handed mace, and he's burly. So it's strength 5, and then also he has strike.
Wow.
Which is really good.
Basically, everything you want on a hero, he has.
Yeah. It's a very nice cheap hero, isn't it?
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah,
he is 80 points, so you pay a bit of a premium over the others. But like in terms of, because I think Gothmog's a good sort of general-ish, like you're not charging him in. I think Guritz gives you some good control of like how you come onto the board, but then Goroth is the guy you're going to throw in, and like. Yeah. Against even like Minister's troops with shield wall, he's going to be wounding on 4s. Like that's really good. So yeah, I think that's the reason to put him in.
Question: is strength 5 better or worse than strength 4 with a 2-handed burly?
Strength 4 with 2-handed burly
is strictly better.
So yeah. I'm going to claim that he is better than Lurtz and 10 points cheaper. Just saying.
Controversial.
Lurtz has 3 attacks and 3 wounds.
Okay, I take it all back.
He takes it all back.
Lurtz
I think just before we move on from this and talk about Rangers of Ithilien, I think it is worth mentioning, of course, what OT has done there is because Games Workshop packaging the banners with the captains, he said that's a good starting point because you want the banner. Of course, you could convert a banner and get the named heroes. It's probably not something that you want to do if you've never converted them before. This is like the first mention you touch. But for people who are listening who've maybe done a bit of modelling before, you can always just get one of the orcs with a spear and just replace it with a banner, and then you can save a bit of money, get the named heroes rather than run and start that way. So there are options there. You don't always have to go for the miniatures that are exactly what Games Workshop sell.
One note of caution, every named hero, apart from Gothmog, is Forge World in this list.
But actually, they're not too badly priced. And
no,
because they're all on foot, you're not getting the kind of massive prices that you normally get with Forge World. They're a bit more pricey than, if they were, say, obviously like a plastic miniature, but you're looking at 24 quid for 2, 12 quid each. It's expensive, but they're nice miniatures. So,
it was just a note of caution.
Yes, yeah. Right, we'll move on to Rangers of Ithilien, shall we? So, Rangers of Ithilien, I think again, starter box set's a good place. You get the 3 main Rangers who are part of this force, and you get 12 Rangers, 12 Warriors of Gondor. Now, do we want to use the Warriors of Gondor in a starter list, though, OT?
I think you could. I wouldn't. Part of the reason for that is I think the Rangers of Gondor are really, really good. I think for the points you're paying, I think the fact that they are fight 4 and they hit on 3s is really, really powerful because they're not defenseless. And like by the time the troops arrive, like I think actually the Rangers of Gondor, they're not the ones you want to be throwing into combat all the time, but they will hold up for a few turns. But in my list, you have to have Faramir, you have to have Frodo, you have to have Sam, you have to have Gollum. Mm-hmm. So I will say that is 240 points that you have no choice over.
Yeah, and that's the issue. This is small points, isn't it?
So if you're running this at 400, it's not a very interactive experience
No.
because you then don't get many choices. What I then did I think it's a fairly straightforward decision. 7 Rangers of Gondor, 7 Rangers of Gondor with spear. So I would just literally line them up at the back, shoot, and when the enemies show up, have your front line without spear and your back line with spear. You're getting two attacks at fight 4. That's not bad. Then the second warband would be Damrod with 25 points and 2 Rangers of Gondor. And
so the frustrating, the frustrating thing about this is if you get the starter set, you only get 12 Rangers.
Yeah.
So if you get the starter set and you want to start with the pure Ranger force, you'd have to go and buy another box of Rangers or try and find a few Rangers on somewhere like eBay, and you'd have to get Frodo, Gollum, Sam. Now, of course, if you're just starting out, don't bother with that. Just run a few warriors. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But you've got to go and get Frodo, Gollum, and Sam. I've got a feeling the only way to get them currently is to get the sculpts of them on Mount Doom.
There is a box available on Wayland, which is 18 quid, which has all 3 of them in. And I think it's the Capture of Smeagol or something. Or
Hashtag not sponsored.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, if that is the case, those are eventually going to go because they're no longer in production.
Yes.
So you might, depending on how many people end up listening to this, have just confirmed that they're no longer on Wayland.
Yeah.
And people who are interested in this Legion because of the new starter box are probably going to be snapping those up at some point. But yeah, if you want the miniatures which are designed to look the way they are in Ithilien, you've either got to try and find them from a third-party site like that who've got some old stock, or you're on eBay, which is a little annoying. It might be interesting to see if Games Workshop address that. They might do. Or you can get the miniatures as they are when they're climbing up Mount Doom, which of course means they don't have elven cloaks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit annoying in terms of making this Legion accessible at the moment.
Yeah.
But not the end of the world. And then in terms of expanding outward, is it literally just a case of take as many Rangers as fill up the warband and then take the next hero and then fill up the Rangers of their warband until you hit the points for that?
I mean, that's not what I've done in my list, but that is what so I built mine around the starter box.
Okay, go on then.
So for 650, there's a slight quirk where you can choose to deploy Frodo, Sam, and Gollum either as I think their own warband or as part of Faramir's. I'd deploy them elsewhere for this one, just to make that clear. But at 650, I would put Faramir on a horse because I think I'm a big fan of mounting heroes. I think you get some really good value from those. I think Faramir's, I'm less certain on that one because essentially it's either a horse or another Ranger of Gondor, essentially, and that's your choice. But in his warband, I did 7 Rangers of Gondor with a spear. I then did 7 Warriors of Minas Tirith with a shield. I would also include a Warrior of Minas Tirith with a banner. I think you should always run at least one banner, and I thought that was a good way to get it in. So yeah, you'd have your Warriors of Minas Tirith at the front with shields and shield wall, so getting them up to defense 7, with the Rangers of Gondor in behind, which I think would work really well. And then my second warband would be Anborn, who's one of the ones that was introduced in Crest of the Ringbearer. He's 35 points with 6 Rangers of Gondor, and then I'd do Madril with 12 Rangers of Gondor. So essentially, that brings you up to 40 characters, 29 of whom have a bow. So that would be your 650 point list.
It's a pretty good list. You will, of course, as we said with the other one, involves getting a couple of Horde World characters there. So OT, roughly how much do these lists end up costing? Obviously, we don't know how much the starter box will be yet. But assuming you're going without starter box, how much?
So the my 400 point list for Army of Gothmog, and that's not using all the models, comes in at about 85 quid. fortunately, because you can use the boxes more efficiently at bigger points levels, 650 still only just comes in over 100. I think it'd be about £105 because you can get more use in the Mordor Orcs. So yeah, actually that's not bad. And then for Rangers of Ithilien, assuming the box sets that exist now still exist further down the line, I'm not saying they will, but there was, and there's still a few knocking around on Wayland and Element. There's the Faramir, Damrod, Madril box, which is really good for this list. That's 23 quid. Then you can get Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. Again, hope that box still exists. And then boxes of Rangers come in at about 25 quid. So the 400-point list would be just under £60, so a fair bit cheaper. And then the 650 list would be just under £80. So actually, like,
and of course, all of that is like the price from Games Workshop, isn't it? So you could potentially shop around. They will definitely release the plastic versions of Faramir and the plastic versions of Gothmog separate to the starter. And I think we can roughly say they'll be around £25. I mean, if you look at, say, like Saruman, 3 miniatures, £26, I imagine that's how much Faramir will be. So it's not going to be much more expensive. And you'll be able to actually get them for a discount of third party now that they're new miniatures. So it actually ends up being slightly cheaper if you go that way.
But I mean, that the discount for the Rangers is purely coming from just the way the boxes work out. And like, I think that's a lot of it. I think maybe you mentioned it earlier, when you are starting to collect things, you can save so much money by using those boxes efficiently. Because like, if you can create an army, even if it doesn't feel brilliant, that uses like all 3 heroes in a box, say, then you've saved yourself buying another box, another 25 quid. And like, that's significant if you're doing that over multiple different armies. So it's definitely something to consider. Move your list around a little bit just to get maximum value from those boxes.
And I mean, we're roughly looking at kind of box sets from GW. We're thinking it might be about 120. I think was that because May, you bought a Kill Team box recently. Was it 120 the full price?
The starter box, they're between £100 and £120.
Yeah, so that's probably what it'd be. So essentially, I think the advice should be is that if the starter box is that much, looking at how much the 400 points are, you should probably get the starter box because you're getting terrain, you're getting both sides, and you'll only need to add a little bit more, and you're getting the rule book. And you will get the rules for these miniatures. We don't know if you'll get the Legendary Legion, so you might have to do that. But you'll get the rules for these miniatures in that box because they're going to be including a little mini booklet. So it's probably a good idea.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think there's just one thing left for us to do then, which is to actually rank them into the tier list. So as we're going through the various different legendary legions, we're going to be ranking them. We've got a four-tier system. So we've got as the top tier, fantastic, kind of like what we consider to be the best legendary legions. The ones which are thematic, they've got interesting rules that make them a bit different. They add something that the main lists don't. That's kind of what we're looking for there. We've then got underneath that the secondary rank of solid, ones that you would definitely consider alongside the normal list, but maybe they aren't quite as thematic or they aren't quite as interesting rules-wise. The third list, average. So there we're kind of saying they're all right, but they're nothing to write home about. And you're kind of really at that point, you've got to really like the Legendary Legion to take it over the normal list, I think is fair to say for average list. And then at the bottom, we've got the whiff, the ones which have just completely whiffed. They're not good Legendary Legions. There's no reason why you'd ever take them. They just don't really do anything. They might be thematic, but just completely rubbish rules-wise, or they might just not really have very good theme at all either. Let's do Army of Gothmog first. What would we say for this one? What do you both think?
Do you want to go first, OT?
It's not good. I would go as far as saying it's bad.
Are you going to go for a whiff then? Is that?
I think whiff feels harsh because it does what it says on the tin. All right, it's an army with Gothmog in. It's the army of Gothmog. But like it, I feel, and actually having nearly done this list, I feel no regret having not done it because the Mordor list I've built isn't a Legendary Legion, but I like it, and I think it does a better job of being a Mordor list than this one does. So I don't know. I'm not going to go with, but yeah, it's not good.
So average, third rank.
Oh, I think average feels a bit generous.
So somewhere in between average and worst. What are your thoughts?
Very, very bottom of average. That's all I'm saying. Very bottom. I'm done. Somebody else talk.
I am thinking average because while it's pretty meh, and essentially you'd only ever take it if these are the models you happen to have in your collection already. It does have a couple of rules that help. Is it worth not taking magic, ring wraiths, or any kind of cavalry? Probably not. But if they're not in your collection anyway, it could be quite a nice little thematic thing to take. I think Mordor Orc heroes benefiting from Gothmog Standfast is probably actually a bit underrated in that, assuming Gothmog's alive, Orcs have pretty shit courage. And at the end of the game, everyone knows, you've got that Orc standing on a objective. You really just need him to pass his bloody courage test or you've lost the game. And naturally, him being an Orc, he's going to want to get out of there before shit gets real. So I think that could really come in clutch sometimes. The range increase on the Gothmog's Age of Men thing, it is a nice little addition. If you have these models, I think it's worth taking. So I'm going to go average.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think if you really love Gothmog, and I'm sure there's somebody out there.
Only a mother could love Gothmog.
Only a mother could love that.
Not even his mother.
Someone will like Gothmog and think he's really cool, or someone will want the challenge of trying to do a Mordor list about magic, maybe. Yeah, I think average is completely.
I will say his new sculpt is pretty good. Like in the reveal stream,
we all like it. Yeah,
I think like obviously we got super hyped over Glorfindel for obvious reasons. We talked about Elrond, but like that's a cool sculpt and it's better than the old one, and it is going to mean that there'll probably be more painted Gothmogs floating around, and maybe that means this Legion with the starter set becomes more of a thing.
Yeah, it might get some more love. Rangers of Ithilien, then May, you can kick us off with this one. What are we thinking?
Okay, so I feel like I'm going to have a bit of a controversial stance on this.
There we go.
But I'm actually going to go for whiff because I think this arm, it's weird because before the FAQ nerf, this was like the power game list. It had, people weren't taking it for its fluff. But now that it's been nerfed, I think it's pretty much been nerfed so hard that you would only take it if you were doing fluff. And I think because it doesn't have that balance, for me, you're just never going to take it.
So in your opinions, in both iterations, it was a whiff. Firstly, because it wasn't fluffy enough, and then secondly, because now it's too underpowered, and you might as well just take the regular list.
I think with without the debuff. So originally, if the special rules weren't as good, maybe if it was 50% bow limit instead of just anything, that would have been okay. But post nerf, it almost needs a better rule than what it has, and because it was either plus or minus the massive 200 points tax. Is it no? It's not 200 points. It's about 150.
155.
150.
So it's a big tax. That's considering earlier we were saying for 5 points, you basically get an extra might point and a special rule. Well, for 155 points, you get to take all bows. But is that worth it? I don't think it is.
Yeah, okay. So I guess that's the kind of competitive side of things. OT, you, I think, have a different view then.
Well, this is gonna be quite.
You're going the other end, are you?
I was going to put it in. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really good.
Wow, as far as the top tier, that's what you.
I think it's either at the very bottom of fantastic or at the very top of good, or whatever we called the one underneath. Like, solid. I don't know. I can see. I don't know of a way I would change this Legion from a theme standpoint. From a competitive standpoint, I agree. It's now a bit weak, and maybe that's what I'm overlooking. But like, I think maybe what I'm thinking about in terms of the Legendary Legion is if you wanted to run this list, you would 100% use this Legendary Legion, and it gives you access to a more themey route of doing things than exists normally. Like, you can include that moment in Osgiliath in a way that you couldn't in the normal rules. And maybe that's what I think a Legendary Legion should do. I agree, it needs some kind of extra special rule. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know what would make it balanced, but I think like it's now almost flipped the other way, whereas before it must have been super strong at low points. It's now pretty bad at low points and gets a little bit better later on. But yeah, so, I think it's really good.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think we've got to return back. We're not doing a competitive tier list solely. What we're looking for is something where there's a significant change, a reason for it to exist. It's thematic, and it gives you interesting rules. The rules are interesting, but they're not fun. And I think that's the main thing that, for me, prevents this from being top tier, because I think it succeeds in all areas thematically.
Yeah.
And I'm not bothered about it being not very competitive at the moment, but I am bothered about it not being fun. And I would never take this list in its current iteration, because I wouldn't want to be playing somebody who's just watching me shooting and rolling 40 dice in my shoot phase, and they're having to sit there and watch me. And then their phase is just moving their models.
Perhaps if there was something that actually encouraged you to get closer as the Rangers of Ithilien, rather than sit back, maybe that would be better. Even just having 50% bow limit.
I mean, we're sort of straying into creating rules territory now, but that's fine. The way that I would fix this, and I don't think it's too complicated, and it's essentially a nerf, so we would need to introduce a buff to outbuff it, but I think it would be so much more interesting if they always had to deploy like in a Maelstrom mission. So fluff-wise, hear me out. Fluff-wise,
he's on one again.
You know the scene in the movies where they ambush the Haradrim.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they like appear out of nowhere and they surround the Haradrim. But that's not how you play Rangers of Ithilien. You play Rangers of Ithilien, if you can, as a castle. You sit at the back and you shoot.
What happens if you play Reconnoiter?
There are issues. I'm not saying that it will work, but what I'm saying is that thematically, you could introduce something like that. It stops them being played in a way that, they just sit at the back, and then it wouldn't be so bad if you reintroduce a stronger version, for example.
What if you put the rule in like the Goblin Mercenaries have, or the Hobbits sheriffs, where they come on a terrain piece?
Yeah, I guess the issue with that is one, what if there's not a suitable terrain piece to deploy them on, depending on cause, or two,
they die same as the other ones. Well, no, because you have an option to do it, so it's not like you have to do it.
But then, if you have the option, you just wouldn't take the option, would you? Because it would be
it becomes a buff if you allow it, so it's not even a debuff.
True,
but it adds to the fluff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that would maybe be something interesting, and you could do like Sam, Frodo, and Gollum could also deploy somewhere outside the point. So that would be my way. In terms of ranking, then you very polar opposites.
I think maybe I was a bit harsh.
We've got to compromise. Are we going to go for solid then?
I think listening to you two talk about it, I feel maybe I was a bit harsh. So I'd be happy with a solid.
I think we've got to differentiate between it and Army of Gothmog. It feels more thematic and more interesting than Gothmog. So I think solid is fine, but probably once we've looked at some others, it's not going to be top of solid.
Yep, that's why I'll settle for that.
Brilliant. Well, I think we'll end it there. We'll just say a couple things before we go. First of all, I imagine that the small number of people who have listened to this, if you liked it, come back, listen to another one. We are intending to keep this going. If you want to tell us your thoughts on Legendary Legions or the new starter boxes, I'll be sure to post some information so you can contact us. And if we eventually do get to the point where we actually have people contacting in, we might do a sort of section where we go through people's thoughts and listeners, but might not be in the first few episodes as we're trying to build an audience. And then next episode, we'll probably be back with another couple of Legendary Legions. We're intending to go through the sort of comparing, thinking about them, adding them to the tier list. But we will also talk about some other stuff scattered in throughout. It's not just going to be the Legendary Legion show. So I think we'll end it there, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Ta-ra.